Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are literally cracking the code on persuasion. We're going to dive in and master the ancient, incredibly powerful art of winning basically any argument by looking at some of history's most brilliant strategies. So let's travel back in time for a second to ancient Greece. Imagine this. What would you do if tens of thousands of lives depended on you winning just one single debate? Well, back in 428 BCE, during the Peloponnesian War, the city of Athens was furious. They actually voted to execute all the men in the rebelling city of Mytilene. But then, this guy named Diodotus steps up, and he saved thousands of lives. How? Not by just yelling the loudest or being the most vengeful guy in the room, but through strategic empathy. He stayed cool under pressure, and he knew exactly what his audience needed to hear.
The insights we're unpacking today are drawn straight from Mehdi Hasan's absolutely compelling book. It totally deconstructs all that conventional wisdom we've been taught and reveals the actual, practical mechanics of debate that the world's greatest speakers have been using for millennia.
All right, Section 1, winning over your audience. And the big myth we're tackling here, that you just need good points.
Look, designing an argument without actually knowing your audience is kind of like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. It just doesn't work. You have got to know their demographics and their values ahead of time so you can adapt your language. Plus, you have to move fast. A Microsoft study actually showed you have just 8 seconds, 8 seconds, to grab their attention before they completely tune out. So start with a provocative hook, not some boring platitude. And really connect with them authentically, through eye contact or a perfectly tailored anecdote. At the end of the day, an argument in a vacuum is absolutely useless.
Moving on to Section 2, why feelings beat facts. The popular myth here is that facts don't care about your feelings. But you know what? In reality, the exact opposite is true.
We so often build our arguments assuming the people listening operate on pure Spock-like logic, right? Like they're just waiting for us to line up the stats and the data. But neuroscientist Antonio Damasio proved that human decision-making is actually governed by Kirk-like emotion. He found that patients who literally lost their emotional processing abilities couldn't even make simple, everyday choices. It's wild. We aren't thinking machines that happen to feel. We are feeling machines that think.
And this brings us right to Aristotle's ancient concept of pathos. While we all love to focus on logos, the raw logic and the hard facts, Aristotle understood that tapping into the audience's emotions, or pathos, is the absolute best vehicle for delivering your logic. Basically, pathos is what opens the door so your facts can actually be heard in the first place.
To really see this in action, let's look back at a super pivotal 1988 presidential debate. Democratic candidate Michael Dukakis was hit with this intensely personal question by CNN anchor Bernard Shaw, asking about a horrifying hypothetical crime against his own wife. The question was designed to act almost like a stethoscope, a way to hear what the candidate was truly feeling on the inside.
And Dukakis' response? Well, it perfectly illustrates the massive risk of completely ignoring pathos. Confronted with a horrifying hypothetical, he just delivered this robotic 360-word policy answer strictly about crime rates and drug education. By leaning entirely on raw data and logic, he totally missed the opportunity to connect with the audience's emotional expectations. As a result, his campaign really suffered because viewers just couldn't see the human side of his argument.
Now, in stark contrast, George H.W. Bush utilized a completely different rhetorical strategy for a very similar question. He leaned heavily into pathos. Instead of citing dry, boring statistics, he used emotive, decisive language, using words like heinous and brutal, to tie his policy stance directly to personal values. It is a textbook example of using emotion to make an argument genuinely resonate with people.
All right, Section 3, always show your receipts. The big myth we're busting here is that just telling the truth is enough.
So, pathos is absolutely vital, sure, but without a solid factual base, your argument is going to collapse. Like pop icon Whitney Houston famously demanded during a 2002 interview, "I want to see the receipts." A compelling story is great, but a compelling story backed up by undeniable hard proof, now that is a knockout blow.
Executing this properly requires a 3-step playbook. First, start hunting for those deep facts in the archives early on so you are hyper-prepared. Next, actively listen to your opponent to catch any live contradictions. You're essentially creating your own receipts on the spot, using their very own words against them. And finally, timing is quite literally everything. You want to wait for them to make a confident but false claim, and then drop your evidence at the exact moment of maximum tension. It just completely pulls the rug right out from under them.
Okay, let's move to Section 4. the ad hominem advantage. And the myth here? That you must always play the ball, not the man.
Now, this completely breaks the most pervasive rule in formal debate. We're always taught that attacking a person is a logical fallacy, right? But out in the real world, it actually relies on Aristotle's concept of ethos, which is persuasion through personal credibility. If an opponent is using their own character or expertise to try and sell an argument, well then scrutinizing that exact credibility is absolutely fair game. You simply cannot let them use their reputation unchallenged.
There are actually 3 perfectly valid ways to target someone's credibility. First, you can use what's called an abusive attack to highlight a track record of unreliability. I mean, if they've lied before, the audience needs to know that. Second, you can use a circumstantial attack to expose a hidden conflict of interest, like, say, a study funded by a super-biased corporation. Or third, you can use a tu quoque attack, which is just Latin for you too, to point out blatant hypocrisy, basically forcing them to explain why they don't practice what they preach.
Philosopher Tom Wyman perfectly validates this controversial tactic. He points out, hey, if ad hominem arguments are supposedly illegitimate, how come they're so incredibly useful? Challenging credibility isn't just some cheap shot. It is an ancient, devastatingly effective weapon that discredits both the opponent and their argument all at once.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. Winning an argument is way less about having perfect logic and so much more about strategy, emotion, and timing. Knowing that, how will you use strategic empathy, perfectly timed receipts, and justified credibility challenges the next time you find yourself in a high-stakes disagreement? The tools are right there, just waiting for you to pick them up.